Keanu Reeves walked into the company lobby, unnoticed by almost everyone. No suit. No assistant. Just a worn leather jacket, old sneakers, and the kind of quiet confidence only comes from knowing exactly who you are. The receptionist looked up, barely making eye contact. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, tapping at her keyboard. "No," Keanu replied calmly. She pointed toward the hallway. "You'll have to wait there." Keanu nodded and sat down. The lobby was modern, cold, and filled with people who were too busy staring at their phones or gossiping to notice him. Glass walls, polished floors, expensive chairs, but no one thought twice about the man in sneakers sitting silently in the corner. What no one realized was this: the man they were ignoring owned the entire place. Keanu Reeves wasn't just any visitor. He was the co-founder and majority shareholder. He owned 53% of everything in that building, yet everyone treated him like a stranger. Minutes passed. Executives walked by, glancing at his clothes and smirking. One whispered to another. A woman laughed loudly into her phone. No one stopped. No one greeted him. No one even offered water. Outside, the morning sun poured in, bouncing off the marble floors, reflecting in the glass walls. Keanu sat there still watching, observing, waiting. Every glance, every smirk, every subtle gesture told him more than words ever could. They didn't know him, but they judged him. By the jacket. By the sneakers. By the quiet calm that didn't fit their expectations. And Keanu, patient as ever, didn't react. He just sat. This wasn't anger. This wasn't ego. This was a test of character. Because some lessons aren't learned in meetings, emails, or reports. They're learned in the way people treat someone they think has no power. 7 minutes. That's all it took. 7 minutes for arrogance, ignorance, and judgment to reveal themselves. Most people in the building had no idea who he was. To them, Keanu Reeves was just another visitor, some quiet, older man in a worn leather jacket and sneakers. Someone who didn't command attention. Someone unimportant. But that assumption couldn't have been farther from the truth. Keanu Reeves wasn't there for recognition. He wasn't there to impress anyone with his title or his wealth. He wasn't there to shake hands or take a tour. He was the co-founder of this company. The majority shareholder. The man who controlled 53% of everything around them. For years he had stayed away. Avoided the limelight. Skipped meetings. Ignored calls. Delegated responsibilities. He had a reason. Some companies thrive on control. Some leaders demand attention. But Keanu believed that true power is revealed by what people do when they think no one is watching. And today he had decided to see the truth. The morning was unusually quiet, the office humming with the soft chatter of executives, assistants, and interns. Keanu walked past the security desk unnoticed, past the digital monitors, past the pristine glass doors leading to the boardroom. Not a single person recognized him. He stopped in the lobby and watched the reactions, or lack of them. Some glanced at his worn sneakers and shook their heads. Others whispered to each other, assuming he didn't belong. A few rolled their eyes and hurried past, laughing about something trivial. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a man who had built this empire, sitting ignored in a hallway full of people who thought they were untouchable. For a moment, he allowed himself a quiet observation. The way people whispered when they thought no one could hear. The way eyes darted nervously when someone glanced toward him. The way arrogance and ignorance blended seamlessly into the office culture. Keanu had seen it all before in other companies, other offices, other situations. But something about today made it different. This wasn't just about power. This wasn't about revenge. It was a test of character. He wanted to know. How do they treat someone they think doesn't matter? How do they behave when the person in front of them could destroy their lives with a single decision, and they don't even know it? Minutes passed. Executives walked past, checking phones, laughing at inside jokes, completely oblivious to him. He sat silently, observing patterns, noting behaviors. Every smirk, every glance, every whispered word revealed volumes. It wasn't a test they knew they were taking. It wasn't a lesson they wanted to learn. But in just a few moments, the truth of this company would become crystal clear. And Keanu? He didn't need to say a word. The moment was already speaking for itself. Backhand index pointing right. Have you ever noticed how people treat you when they think you're unimportant? Do they respect you? Ignore you? Mock you? Sometimes, the people who seem the most confident are hiding the deepest insecurities. And sometimes, the quiet ones observing from the sidelines hold more power than you can imagine. Keanu sat quietly in the lobby, letting the minutes stretch. Time seemed to slow down. Executives walked past, absorbed in their own worlds. One glanced at his worn leather jacket and turned away, a smirk barely hidden. Another laughed loudly on the phone, the words dripping with condescension. A third whispered to a colleague, pointing subtly at him, assuming no one could hear. Every gesture, every glance, every laugh, a silent testament to arrogance. Behind the glass walls, the boardroom buzzed with life. Laughter. Whiskey glasses clinking. Expensive watches flashing under the fluorescent lights. Powerful voices discussing deals, salaries, and expansions. But no one thought to notice the man quietly observing them from the hallway. 7 minutes passed. Not a single person approached. Not a single hand offered water. Not a single word of acknowledgement. It was as if he didn't exist. And in that absence, the truth became painfully clear. They didn't see him as a person. They didn't see him as a leader. They only saw the worn jacket, the old sneakers, the quiet demeanor. They judged what they assumed. Keanu observed every detail. The subtle eye rolls. The nervous glances when someone realized he was still there. The casual dismissal, the arrogance disguised as confidence. It was human behavior at its rawest. People expose themselves when they think no one important is watching. And this was gold. Because power isn't just about wealth or position. It's about understanding who people truly are when they believe they are untouchable. Some executives leaned back in their chairs, laughing louder than necessary, trying to assert dominance. Some glanced out the window, pretending they were too busy to care. A few tapped on their laptops, making notes, speaking on the phone, completely unaware of the silent observer. But Keanu noticed everything. Every smirk, every whispered insult, every condescending glance. Every tiny action revealed more about their character than any report or financial statement ever could. And the irony wasn't lost on him. They were sitting in a building he co-owned. They were laughing, joking, and planning, while completely underestimating the man who held their futures in his hands. He didn't move. He didn't react. He simply watched, letting their arrogance speak for itself. The room behind the glass had no idea what was coming. No one understood that the quiet, patient man in sneakers had the power to reshape every life in that office within moments. 7 minutes became 8. 8 became 9. And still no one approached him. This wasn't a test of patience. It wasn't a test of authority. It was a test of human nature. Because when people think someone doesn't matter, their true character is revealed. And Keanu Reeves, calm, quiet, and observant, was about to witness it all. Backhand index pointing right. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been judged or ignored just because of what you wear, how you look, or how quiet you are? Sometimes the people who seem most confident are the ones who reveal the deepest flaws when they think no one important is watching. And sometimes the quiet ones, the patient observers, hold the most power. Keanu stood, calm, unhurried. Every movement deliberate, every step measured. The executives in the lobby and hallway barely noticed at first. They were still laughing, still talking, still absorbed in their own self-importance. But then he walked. Straight past the receptionist, past the glass walls, past the buzzing boardroom. The sound of his sneakers against the polished floor echoed quietly, yet sharply, like a metronome marking the passing of time. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but for those who were paying attention, it was the sound of change arriving. The door to the boardroom swung open. "What are you doing here?" someone barked, their tone sharp, defensive. Keanu said nothing. He simply stepped inside. The room went quiet, not immediately but gradually, like a tide pulling back to reveal the rocks beneath. Eyes darted nervously. Laughter faltered mid-sentence. Glasses were set down a little too firmly on the polished table. No one moved. No one spoke. And then he did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He placed it carefully on the center of the table. The silence was instantaneous. The kind of silence that presses down on you, heavy and unyielding. Faces changed. Smiles disappeared. The smirks, the jokes, the laughter. They vanished as if someone had blown a whistle, and all the players suddenly remembered the rules. It wasn't about the card. It wasn't even about him. It was about truth. The executives leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Hands hovered over laptops, pens, phones. Some were frozen mid-sip of whiskey. The room smelled of expensive cologne, polished wood, and tension thick enough to taste. And then it hit them. They finally understood. The man they had ignored, judged by his jacket and sneakers. The quiet observer in the corner. The one they assumed didn't matter. He owned the company. Not a little. Not a portion. He owned the majority. Every spreadsheet, every contract, every decision, they were under his control. They had laughed at him. They had whispered about him. They had dismissed him as insignificant. And now, the weight of that arrogance hit them like a wave. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He let the cards speak and let the silence do the rest. Each executive felt it differently. A pit in the stomach. A tightening in the chest. The sudden, undeniable realization that they had underestimated the wrong man. 7 minutes in the lobby, 7 minutes of laughter, whispers, and arrogance. And now, every second of that ignorance was exposed, crystallized, undeniable. Keanu stood, calm and silent, letting the room digest the truth. The card on the table was small, almost insignificant. But in that moment, it carried the weight of authority, truth, and justice. They looked at each other, panicked, unsure of how to react. No amount of charm, excuses, or laughter could erase what they had done, or how wrong they had been. And Keanu? He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was simply observing and waiting. Because the boardroom, once alive with arrogance and laughter, was now frozen in disbelief, caught in the tension of a reality they could no longer ignore. The first move had been made. The first lesson had been delivered. And this was only the beginning. Have you ever seen someone completely underestimated walk in and command the room without saying a word? Sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one everyone should fear, not because they're loud or aggressive, but because they see everything. The boardroom was silent. Not a single word had been spoken since Keanu placed the card on the table. The executives stared at him, their faces pale, their confident smirks gone. And then the door opened again. An employee stepped in carrying a stack of files. His hands trembled and his voice quivered as he spoke. They were planning to sell the company, he stammered. The words hit like a hammer. Secret deals. Hidden transfers. Plans to strip power from the very people who had built the company. Hundreds of employees' jobs hanging by a thread. Projects canceled before they even began. Every single executive in the room froze. Keanu's eyes scanned the room, calm but piercing, like a hawk watching from above. He didn't need to raise his voice. The truth spoke for itself. They had laughed at him. They had ignored him. They had assumed that someone in a worn jacket and sneakers had no say, no authority, no knowledge. And now, the weight of their arrogance was crashing down around them. The employee continued, shaking, flipping through the files. They were planning to sell shares to external investors without informing the board, or you, sir, he said, looking at Keanu. Hundreds of jobs would have been lost. Salaries frozen. Departments dismantled. It was all ready to happen. The room was filled with murmurs of panic, a low hum of fear vibrating off the polished walls. Executives shifted in their chairs, suddenly aware of the fragility of their positions. Every phone call they had made, every secret conversation, every plan to undermine their colleagues, they had done it under the watchful eye of the man who could destroy it all. And Keanu had seen every moment. He didn't react immediately. He simply let the files sit in front of him as if weighing them, absorbing the scope of the betrayal, and observing the faces of those who had assumed they were untouchable. The air in the room was thick. You could almost hear the collective heartbeat of fear and realization. One executive finally found the courage to speak. Keanu, we didn't know you were coming today, he stammered. We thought. Keanu held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. No, he said softly, deliberately. I didn't come here to be recognized. I came here to see how you treat people you think don't matter. The silence returned, heavier than before. He walked slowly around the table, letting each person feel the weight of his gaze. Every whisper, every glance, every decision made in arrogance. It was all visible now. Nothing was hidden. These files, these plans, they show everything, he continued. But it's not just about betrayal. It's about character. He paused, letting the words sink in. The executives leaned forward, unsure whether to beg, apologize, or run. No reaction would change the reality in front of them. Power, he said, is not just about what you control. It's about how you behave when you believe no one important is watching. And today, I've seen who you really are. Some of them tried to look defiant. Others were pale, broken, and silent. The room had shifted from confident arrogance to a fragile tension. Keanu's gaze returned to the files. These plans, he said, would have cost hundreds of lives, their jobs, their stability, their futures. That's a price I will not allow. He looked back at the executives. And that is why disrespect has consequences. The truth had been revealed. The arrogance had been exposed. And the people who had thought themselves untouchable were finally confronted with the consequences of their actions. Backhand index pointing right. Should people like this be forgiven? Do arrogance and deception deserve a second chance? Or does real justice demand a lesson that cannot be ignored? Keanu didn't smile. He didn't shout. He simply stood there, calm, patient, and in control. The room understood something they had never considered. Disrespect isn't just personal, it's a reflection of character. And when the stakes are high, character determines who survives. The air in the boardroom felt suffocating. Executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, whispers filling the space between heartbeats. Glasses of whiskey, untouched, reflected the bright fluorescent lights above. The files sat in front of Keanu like a silent testament to the arrogance and deception that had filled this room for months. Keanu looked at each person carefully, his gaze calm but unyielding. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a desire for revenge. It was observation, the kind of observation that sees every flaw, every lie, every misstep. "I didn't come here to be recognized," he said softly, his voice carrying across the room like a quiet storm. "I came here to see how you treat people you think don't matter." The executives swallowed hard. Some tried to hide it. Some couldn't. Their arrogance, their whispers, their dismissive laughter, it was all laid bare in front of them. Keanu paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Every second stretched, making the silence almost unbearable. "You thought you could plan behind closed doors. You thought I wouldn't notice. You assumed that appearances matter more than character." He walked slowly around the table, each step deliberate, measured, commanding attention without raising his voice. The executives shifted nervously, sensing the gravity of the moment, understanding that nothing in this room would ever be the same. "Respect," he continued, "is not earned by wealth. It is not earned by titles, suits, or watches. It is earned by how you treat others, especially those who hold no power, who hold no influence, who you think cannot hurt you." He stopped at the head of the table where the highest-ranking executive sat frozen, eyes wide. "I've seen enough," Keanu said, the words quiet but cutting. "Arrogance, disrespect, deceit, they have no place here." The boardroom, once buzzing with laughter and whispers, was now dead silent. The hum of the air conditioning, the faint tick of a clock on the wall, and the distant murmur of the lobby were the only sounds. Then Keanu made his decision. "You're all terminated. Effective immediately." The words hit like a shockwave. Security officers, previously stationed quietly at the doors, stepped forward. Executives froze, realizing that all power had vanished in an instant. Phones were set down. Laptops were closed. Hands trembled. Faces drained of color. Some tried to speak, stammering apologies, excuses, or desperate pleas. Keanu did not respond. He did not need to. The files on the table, the whispered betrayals, the laughter that had echoed through this room, it all spoke louder than words ever could. "Why?" One executive finally managed, voice shaking. "Why terminate us? Isn't that extreme?" Keanu's gaze didn't waver. "This isn't about punishment. This is about accountability. Disrespect has consequences. Deception has consequences. Arrogance has consequences." He turned slowly, surveying the room once more. Every executive now understood the reality. They had underestimated the wrong man. "This company will not tolerate those who see others as less than," he said firmly. "Because real power is not in fear. Real power is in character." The security officers escorted the terminated executives out quietly but efficiently. No shouting. No chaos. Just the stark, undeniable reality of accountability. The boardroom, once filled with laughter and arrogance, now felt empty and charged. Every person remaining, employees who had stayed loyal, silent, observant, felt a mix of fear and relief. Keanu turned to them, his voice softening. "I didn't do this to assert power. I did this to protect this company, and the people who make it strong. If you believe respect matters more than status, if you believe honesty matters more than deceit, then stay. If not, the door is open." The employees exchanged glances, silently recognizing that they had just witnessed true leadership in action. This was more than a lesson in authority. It was a lesson in character, humility, and justice. The kind of lesson that few forget. Keanu Reeves didn't need to shout. He didn't need to brandish wealth, influence, or fame. The quiet confidence, the patient observation, and the unshakable understanding of who holds real power, that was enough. And in that moment, the company and everyone in the room understood something profound. Disrespect, arrogance, and deceit are temporary. Character, integrity, and justice are eternal. The boardroom was quiet. The echoes of footsteps, murmurs, and whispers had long faded. The arrogance that had once filled the room with laughter was gone. Every trace of false confidence, every smirk, every whispered plan, they had vanished in a matter of minutes. Keanu Reeves stood among the remaining employees. Not as a figure of fear. Not as a distant, untouchable owner. But as a presence of calm authority, of fairness, of true leadership. Those who remained looked at him with a mixture of awe, relief, and disbelief. They had witnessed something few ever get to see. A man who could wield immense power, and chose to wield it not for revenge but for justice and integrity. "Your jobs are safe," Keanu said softly, letting the words sink into every corner of the room. Relief spread almost instantly. The tension that had gripped the air loosened. A collective exhale filled the space, as if the weight of fear had been lifted all at once. But the lesson was not over. Keanu knew that fear alone doesn't build respect. Discipline alone doesn't teach humility. And power alone doesn't inspire loyalty. "This company," he continued, his voice steady and deliberate, "will never judge people by clothes, titles, or appearances again. Because real character isn't measured by wealth, position, or the ability to intimidate. It's measured by how you treat people you think have no power." Some employees nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. Others simply stared, realizing they had just witnessed a defining moment in the company's history. The lesson had been delivered, but the ripple effect was just beginning. The employees knew that from this moment forward, the culture of the company had shifted. Gone were the days when arrogance and disrespect could hide behind polished shoes, expensive suits, or clever excuses. Gone were the days when influence and power were used to belittle or dismiss others. Keanu paused, looking out at the faces before him. Every individual reflected a mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, fear, and inspiration. He understood that real leadership isn't about fear. It's about trust, integrity, and the courage to act when necessary. He walked slowly around the room, letting the weight of the moment settle on everyone. "This isn't about punishment," he said. "This is about accountability. This is about showing that arrogance, deceit, and disrespect have consequences, whether you recognize them or not." A silence fell over the room, but it was different this time. It wasn't heavy with fear or tension. It was quiet with understanding, with clarity. The employees felt something rare, a shared sense of purpose and morality. Keanu continued, "Some of you may have witnessed disrespect or arrogance before, and thought it would go unnoticed. Today you've seen the truth. No one, no matter how confident, no matter how clever, is beyond accountability." He paused, letting the words linger. The people who were removed from this room weren't terminated because of failure or incompetence. They were removed because character matters more than status. Because integrity matters more than influence. And because how you treat others reveals who you truly are. Heads nodded subtly. A few employees exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that this was a moment they would remember forever. Keanu stepped back, letting the room breathe. The lesson had been delivered. The arrogance had been exposed. The company and everyone in it had been reshaped in an instant. "And let this be a reminder," he said, "that leadership isn't about titles. It isn't about wealth. It isn't about fear or intimidation. It's about how you use your power to protect, inspire, and guide." For a moment, the room was still, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone. Then, slowly, relief turned into quiet smiles. Gratitude replaced fear. Respect replaced tension. Keanu finally spoke the last words that would echo in their minds long after. "Because real character is shown in how you treat people you think have no power." The lesson was clear. The consequences had been delivered. And the employees understood, in a way they never would have otherwise, that arrogance always reveals itself, and humility always prevails. Outside the boardroom, the office buzzed quietly. Employees returned to their desks, but something had changed. A culture had shifted. A silent understanding had been established. Respect is not optional. Integrity is not negotiable. And character always matters more than status. Keanu Reeves didn't need to be loud. He didn't need to yell or punish indiscriminately. The quiet power, the calm observation, and the patient justice, these were more than enough. And for the employees who remained, this wasn't just a story they witnessed, it was a lesson they would carry for life. Backhand index pointing right. Do you think Keanu made the right decision? Backhand index pointing right. Should the executives have faced harsher consequences? Speech balloon. Comment below. Thumbs up like if respect should be unconditional. Repeat button. Share this with someone who needs this reminder.